Hey everyone, before we get into today's episode, we kind of decided to do something a little more different. Instead of our normal movie reviews, we decided to actually continue our conversation with Dan and Patricia, the creators behind My Gal from our Monday episode, and actually got into talking about horror and literature and comic books. We had a lot of fun talking about this, and we hope you guys enjoy it as well. All right, let's get right to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Punk Rock Horror Podcast. I'm Matt.
That was really loud. I'm Cody. Hello.
Today we are here to remind you that no matter what anyone has told you, you are a beautiful and amazing person.
I've been watching a lot of Queer Eye,
It's
haven't
a
you?
great show. And we are rejoined with the amazing Patricia and Dan from our Monday episode. How's it going, guys?
It's going good. Good to be back again.
Really
So,
good.
yeah, we had a ton of fun talking with you guys for our Monday episode. It was a blast. We literally lost track of time. It was fun, and we don't really get. I think it's like the first time in a while that we actually had a very long episode.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
since our Denver podcast interview.
So that was like episode 15. So
Yeah.
so yeah, like you get. So that was the first one in a long time that we actually had a really long episode. So thank you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, no, thank you.
You're welcome.
So
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun, like learning about getting into the technical side of comics and everything.
Oh, yeah,
too. So
there's
that
a
was,
lot
like,
about
really
that,
cool.
yeah, we could probably do a whole nother episode about it if we really want to.
Well, that's because when you think about like the average person who gets into reads comics and stuff like that, they don't think about all the technical stuff
Yeah.
that get into
Probably
it.
not.
Like there's probably a good amount of people that just think like, oh, they just draw it and then bubble things in. And it's like,
That's so much more work.
no.
Oh my god.
Like,
It's just the tip of the iceberg.
The hardest part is staying awake.
yeah.
That's the hardest part.
So since we didn't get to it on our Monday episode, we're going to talk about horror and literature today instead of giving you guys some like movie recommendations. So we hope you guys enjoy this as much as we're going to enjoy this. I'm sure you will, though.
I'm going to enjoy it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
See, there's so much support already around this. So do we want to do something you love, something you hate, or just we want to skip it this time?
We guess we could skip it because we got a lot to cover in this
Yeah.
one.
So we'll
And
skip
since
it.
we're already doing something a little different, we can skip it.
Yeah, although I do owe an apology to our latest patron on our Patreon. Katura, you are our latest Patreon supporter, and we owe you. We were supposed to give you thanks earlier than this, so sorry about that. But thank you for being our latest supporter on our Patreon, Katura.
Yeah, thanks, Katura.
So going forward, we'll just jump right into it. So the genre of horror has ancient origins with roots in folklore and religious traditions, focusing on death, the afterlife, evil, the demonic, and the principle of the thing embodied in the person. These were manifested in stories of beings such as witchcraft, vampires, werewolves, and ghosts. European horror fiction became established through works by the ancient Greeks and ancient Romans. In Greek mythology, Prometheus was a titan who was the inspiration for the title of Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus. Prometheus' earliest known appearance is I'm going to probably butcher this, in Hesiod's Theogony. However, the story of Frankenstein was influenced far greater on the story of Hippolytus. Do you want to do the next part, or do you want to talk about that?
I'll do the next part real fast.
Okay.
And then the 18th century slowly directed the horror genre into traditional Gothic literature. 18th century Gothic horror drew on these sources with the seminal and controversial The Castle of Otranto, 1964, by English author Horace Walpole.
1764.
I said 18, didn't I?
I think you said
No,
19.
no,
You said
17.
19. I thought you meant like
That's
a
good.
1760. This all actually came out in the 60s. This is
Start over.
this marked the first incorporated elements of the supernatural instead of pure realism. In fact, the first edition was published disguised as an actual medieval romance from Italy, discovered and republished by a fictitious translator.
And it's actually what Jane Austen based Northanger Abbey off of,
Wow.
is that book. Because Catherine who's the heroine in that book, is a huge fangirl of horror literature during that time, and so she used The Castle, that novel, as a basis for Catherine's kind of fangirliness.
Oh, wow.
Damn, that's cool.
I'm glad you guys are in on this one.
The more
so
you know.
And then to finish that off, the Gothic tradition blossomed into the genre modern readers call horror literature in the 19th century. Influential works and characters that continue resonating with film and cinema today saw their genesis in such works as The Brothers Grimm, Hansel and Gretel in 1812, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in 1818, Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow in 1820, James C. Loudon's The Mummy or Tale of the 22nd Century, 1827, Victor Hugo's The Hunchback of Notre Dame as well in 1831. So that was a lot we just read through, obviously. So let's go ahead and touch on that. Let's talk about that. So obviously, way back in early human civilization, there's been already writings of horror in like what they've mentioned in folklore and even probably urban legends way back then with titans, vampires, and hell, I guess you could even consider the chupacabra with how far that origin goes back.
Yeah.
Actually, chupacabra did not become a coined term until 1996.
Really?
I know.
I
I
thought
find
it went
that
farther
I'm
than
amazed
that.
by that
Yeah.
because I'm always like, oh no, it's like this old kind of, Hispanic
Yeah.
folklore.
Well, because I know
legend,
there's been
but-
like different like takes on the urban legend before it got the name. So I
That's
mean,
pretty cool. Well, and another thing, cool thing too that we didn't touch on is Dracula. Like, he was inspired by actual people, so it's like an actual person, Vlad the Impaler.
thank you.
So it's like cool, like horror from way back then is like kind of nowadays where they're inspired by actual people instead of just like lore and myths and stuff.
A super fun thing about Dracula too is, author Bram Stoker actually got the idea to do a vampire story in the first place because he was best friends with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote Sherlock Holmes, and he wrote a short story with vampires, and then Bram Stoker's like, dude, that was awesome, I want to write a vampire thing now. And that's how we got Dracula, actually, was because of Sherlock.
Well, one thing
That's
that
really cool.
one thing that we've made a message on this podcast is that horror is in our lives in general. It has a much bigger influence than we take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's obvious that, excuse me, I'm burping.
You done?
I think I'm good. That through the passage of time, that has been apparent. I mean, we can even talk about, the screwed up stories in Roman and Greek mythology with the Titans and the gods. I mean, we could talk about how, Zeus was basically a hoe.
Yeah.
Zeus is the real villain of Greek mythology, and Hades
Yeah.
is actually like the nicest of the 12 gods.
Yeah.
And then when you think about it, Hades is portrayed as this most evil person from hell. So, like, he's the most horrific out of all of them when they're portrayed by him.
So
He's the nicest. He's just like, I love you,
just wanna be
Persephone.
hugged.
Like, and he's the only one who did not cheat on his wife.
Mm-hmm.
So then
He
here's the
only-
question
yeah.
I want to pose to the table, want everyone's intake, is
Everyone.
everyone.
Okay.
We might go get my neighbors involved. It's like, hey, we're doing this weird kind of like radio thing. You want to come over? So here's my question is, since, we just said that Zeus is basically the bad guy in all of, Roman and Greek mythology, because he's a dick.
He is a dick.
Do you think that since Hades, who is Lord of, the darkness, the underworld, that those stories have resonated with outcasts in society like us because he has been portrayed as the bad guy and really isn't the bad guy? So to make that question a little more clear is, do you think that Hades and, dark, macabre, and horror has been more appealing to people like us because it resonates with us more than stories of Zeus? So like darkness is something that we can all resonate with because it's poorly misconstrued and misjudged more often than not. Does that question make sense, or do I need to clarify that a little more? You can tell me if I need to. Sometimes I am a little confusing.
I think I see what you mean, but I don't know if I agree.
Oh, no, I want to hear your thoughts. I really do.
Okay. So I would wonder about the Greek concept of Hades.
Okay.
As it transformed with Hebrew concepts of hell.
Okay.
Or Gehenna. And how the like a lot of people have, like, that Hades is viewed as the god of the underworld, which is very different from the devil being in hell.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if like the term Hades becomes used interchangeably with the term hell.
Yeah.
Like at least in the first century, when if not before, when you have like the Greeks and the Romans dispersing to the Middle East and to Palestine, and so I think that you get this concept of like in Greek, sure, some people went to, or in Greek mythology, some people went to Olympus, but only if you were like deified, like if you became a god.
Okay.
Everybody else just went to hell, like that's what it was. You just went to like a Hebrew mindset of hell, and a Greek or Roman mindset of Pluto or Hades, being god of the underworld there. But hell in that concept is very different, because everybody that didn't just go to Olympus went to the underworld. And so then you have a mindset of where the term Hades is used to become equated with hell, which until now is still pretty much used interchangeably.
Okay.
And so my question would be, I guess, which tradition are we looking at when you ask the common person on the street in Western culture, what is Hades and what is hell, how that would be used interchangeably, and maybe which we're talking about, because I think probably a lot of people would have more of a Judeo-Christian view of hell,
Right.
Yeah.
and then maybe use that same view of Hades when you get into mythology, and that's why I'm not sure. I'm not sure how. I think you would have to use that as the decoder ring to answer that question, personally.
No, I love your input, and that's like why I ask these questions, because if you don't agree, then I want to hear why you don't agree, and that's the type of discussion I'd like to have with everyone. I mean, as fun as it is for everybody to be like, yeah, totally, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not saying I disagree. I'm just saying like, I think it's a question that you would almost have to define the terms.
It's a little loaded, right?
Yeah, is Hades is Pluto or Hades? Is that being in Greek and Roman mythology the god, the supreme being, the one in charge of the underworld where dead humans, with exceptions in that mythology, where essentially just everybody goes. It's not too dissimilar from in like the
Norse mythology, Valhalla, and hell.
Yeah, that as well. And then also I was thinking more like in like Dia de los Muertos stories.
Yeah.
Excuse me, where like
Land
where
of the Dead.
Yeah, or exactly where it's like until you're forgotten, but it's not necessarily a good place in the same sense. Whereas in Judeo-Christian beliefs, you have a good or a bad option. In Greek, you just have an option. It's not good or bad. It's just your option.
Right.
But because that's the option, and because later we think of a good or a bad option outside of Olympus that only the gods go to, essentially, or Dionysus, like you can get that place. Do then people take a concept of the devil or Satan and then transpose that onto Hades or Pluto?
Yeah.
And I think people do.
They definitely do.
Yeah, I think they do, and I think that they also then take ideas of Hades, the place, or Pluto, the persona, and then also place that on the Judeo-Christian view of Satan. And I would say that I don't want to relate to that. but again, the Hades isn't necessarily evil.
And I guess that's kind of more so what I'm getting
he just is. Yeah. Like Hades as a place is just where you go when you die. Versus the being who it's like, this is his lot. Like that's what he's got. Like this is his realm. It's not necessarily good or bad. Just you're there.
Yeah.
Versus a concept of not Olympus, but a heaven which you can go to
That you earned by being good.
Yeah.
or whatever method.
Something that kind of goes into that talking about Hades real quick, is one thing we talked about on this podcast as well, is like snuff films, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because
like
that is the general right response is to shiver.
Like chewing tobacco, like movies about
just people chewing on tinfoil.
That's even
but no, so supposedly people will watch snuff films because it has them deal with morality or not morality, mortality. Is morality or mortality?
Probably both.
Mortality. Yeah, I guess both. So more mortality. So and the fact that they're not on they're not gonna live forever, and so it kind of makes them deal with that. So do you think that with Tales of Hades and the Underworld that people kind of like get a little obsessed with that because it's the same thing as it has them deal with mortality, or do you think it's just something that is a taboo, and because it's a taboo, it's enticing?
There have been so many stories in Greek mythology where people have gone back and gotten loved ones and returned their souls back onto the earth so they can live again. And Hades is actually a pretty chill god where he's like, okay, like, gosh, who was it? Lute player. Orpheus. Where he was going back to get his girlfriend Eurydice. Like, he's just like, okay, I see that you love her, just... her soul's going to follow you back. Just don't look back, otherwise she'll be stuck in the underworld. And so the concept of Hades is that death is not final. Right. You can even go down and visit your grandpa and get advice from him for your quest. So death is not final in Greek mythology. You can always come back. You can always go visit. Whereas I think what's really unsettling, at least with me with snuff films, is that it's not fiction. It's very, very real, and that's why I would never watch that. For me, horror, the fun of horror is that it is fictional.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I mean, I like true crime for it being true crime. I I was talking to somebody, and she might end up listening to this, but I was talking to somebody, and one of the things I said about, I think it was specifically about, well, again, I don't want to identify anybody at all. It was about a serial killer.
You can give them a fake name.
Well, but then
we have Billy Fuzzy Toes and the Mad
Then
Pooper
you know it's
here,
not
so.
that. So if you give a name, then it's like, it's anyone but this name. Unless
like
it's a fake name that's also a real name. Maybe it's either way.
Yeah, but we have someone called Billy Fuzzy Toes on here.
And the Mad Pooper.
Yeah, the Mad Pooper.
But then that person, if they're really named Billy, they know it's not them when maybe it was. Maybe.
Yeah, but it's up to the listener to figure that out.
But anyway, so we were talking about a serial killer, and I was like, I think that stories of the serial killer are beneficial for studies of law enforcement in the judicial system and studies of human nature and psychology and psychiatry. I said, but beyond that, I do not celebrate a serial killer. I don't want to wear a shirt with the serial killer on it. Like, I'll watch stuff to learn about, because I think there's a benefit to society about understanding the true crime as a means to prevent crimes like that, and as a means to prevent persons from dealing with issues by serial killing or by whatever crime it is they commit. But I don't like the side of that. I have an interest in that, in for again the psychology and the preventing crime, but I don't have an interest in it as in celebrating that person. Like, I wouldn't want a painting done by a serial killer in jail, and I know there's a huge industry for that, and that's why to me it's a fine line between celebrating the tabloids at a supermarket that celebrate crimes just as much as does any other just as does any other true crime coverage, versus saying this is reprehensible. I'm not going to celebrate this person. I don't want a poster of this person. But I do think that there is value in studying the story, and that to me is the difference between, in some ways, a snuff film versus a true crime coverage. Is this to be, did this happen and now they found the remains of people and they're trying to learn about why that happened and how that can be prevented through law enforcement or psychiatry, versus let's celebrate what is happening. Well, that's my thoughts.
And let's move on to Gothic here in a second, because we did mention the 19th, 18th century. But one thing I do kind of want to touch on, last thing I want to say on snuff is we kind of do live in a snuff obsessed society, if you really think about it, with the news that we watch, and like even if you think your average person who drives by a car wreck will slow down to look at the car wreck, will look to see at the massacre. Not everyone. Obviously, there are some people who just mind their business and keep going, but there are other people that do, wonder, and they do look, and even if their general response is like, that's terrible, like, they still kind of want to see it. And so I'm not making the advocacy for snuff at all, but I'm just saying that it is,
I think
in
it's
a weird
another
way,
level.
in our society.
It's an obsession of the grim and macabre.
Yeah.
I would say that if there are people who purchase or obtain or even make films of, and I guess I also want to make sure I have the correct understanding, if these are films of people being killed or tortured.
Yeah, that's generally, that is snuff. That is snuff. Exactly.
If that, and I mean, and that, even if there's listeners who aren't aware of that for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Like if that is the film, I would say that idea, the concept of procuring this item to watch, it's not documentary covering, it's not journalism.
Yeah.
If you found someone
it's exploitation.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, someone would watch that for completely different reasons. Right. Now, you're in the crimes, you're in the judicial system, and you got a lawyer who's watching it to try to figure out, I guess, defending.
Yeah.
Or maybe not defending, but finding an appropriate. I mean, because there's lawyers who say this person didn't do it, get him out of here, and there's lawyers who are like, okay, this person did manslaughter but not murder. And so maybe the lawyer's watching for that reason, and clearly the detectives and the law enforcement is watching it to figure out what happened, so they're not watching it for kicks. And I think the difference to me is watching it just for kicks without any journalistic or psychiatry, just for entertainment, watching someone being tortured for entertainment. That's, I think, a very different thing.
No, if you have something to add in, Patricia, you can.
No, I just, like, when I think about snuff films, I go back to American Horror Story in the 4th season Freak Show. The main character, Elsa Mars.
I like that season.
Yeah, she is amputated from both her legs are amputated from the knee down, and that was in her flashback story. They show that she was participating in what she thought was just a sex tape.
Yeah.
And they drug her, and they amputate her, and they torture her, and they almost kill her. And there's just something so extremely sad about that, and it's something I personally don't want to see, because it's supposed to be real.
Because it's the exploitation of human vulnerability.
Yeah, and so there is this line, I think, that does get crossed between fiction and reality when it does come to horror. Because when it's fiction, you're just like almost cheering, oh yeah, Jason Voorhees, come kill those stupid teenagers. But if it's like reality, it's like, oh my god, this is so horribly sad that I am watching this other person's life actually fade away and not do anything about it and just be this bystander about it. And even if it is for like journalistic intentions and trying to find out the truth, I know personally I would not be able to stomach it still, even if it was my job.
Yeah, I think we agree with you on that for sure. So yeah, let's talk about Gothic, and Gothic literature in general. I mean, probably one of the two of the most notorious authors in that would be like Edgar Allan Poe, and even H.P. Lovecraft kind of falls into that. Obviously more space cosmic horror, but he still kind of falls into it with some of the themes and some of the stories.
Oh, definitely, especially with the cults surrounding Lovecraft.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I guess one story that was always very apparent to me from Edgar Allan Poe was The Crow. Probably his most notorious work, and it deserves, a lot of that fame because it's a good story. It's a good horror story, and it just generally is creepy. Do you guys have any of your favorite, like, Gothic picks, whether it is from Edgar or anyone else?
Definitely Edgar Allan Poe. Poe's my homeboy. I would have to say, besides Telltale Heart, one of my favorite ones is Bernice. And that's where this woman gets killed, and he, like, keeps her teeth in a box, and, like, they rattle and stuff, and it's kind of like the Telltale Heart in that sense, where the guilt drives him insane. Yeah. But just, like, the thought of teeth, because that's, like, one of the things that gets left behind, like, even longer than bones, is, like, teeth. You identify people by dental records, so it's just, it gives this yeah, you can commit this crime, but you're gonna get caught eventually. There's no way to eradicate something. There is this permanence here.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like towing the line between like the guilty pleasure of I got away with this versus, oh, I'm going to get caught eventually and I have to live with this paranoia the rest of my life.
Yeah. And real quick, I owe an apology. I called it the Crow. I meant the Raven.
Yeah, I was
just my
mistake.
mistake. Sorry, I don't know why I was saying the Crow.
Yeah,
I was
just letting you go with it.
Well, that's because there's that fantastic comic by James O'Barr.
I think that might have been why. Because
yeah.
I don't know why. Sorry, guys. I meant the Raven. The Raven. That's my mistake.
Caw.
So that's my bad. My mistake. Sorry.
I just assumed it was something I wasn't familiar with.
No, I appreciate you guys just supporting it. Not no, I meant the Raven. That's my mistake. Sorry.
For me, like my favorite Gothic literature was Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Like,
so good.
Because like that was the very first like actual horror book I ever read and everything, and I feel like I relate so much to the monster and everything. Where like you're just because like he's a little bit of everybody in the town technically, even though they're all dead, but like he's part of like everybody. But he's exiled because, you know, he doesn't fit in while he still has little bits of everything that's in there.
And how intelligence is monstrous.
Yeah.
Because he is so smart.
And not even just that, but he's a creation of science.
Yeah.
And how everyone, especially nowadays, how everyone is just like, no, fuck science. And it's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like,
we can make monsters.
Yeah, it's like the biggest thing I've seen the rounds with like scientific input nowadays is like we could actually create dinosaurs in 4 years. And it's like there's literally 5 movies that say don't do that.
Exactly.
Like let's put it towards better things and so I don't know. That was kind of like the thing is I related so much to the monster.
Right.
And I read Bram Stoker's like the original his Dracula and everything, and I was like, it's a good story and stuff, but there's just something always appealing to the monster for me.
Well, and it's also Frankenstein, or the modern day Prometheus, is very much a horror story about bad parenting.
Yeah.
Victor Frankenstein is the worst mother in history.
He's just a piece of shit, and I don't know how everyone's just like, you know, they call the monster Frankenstein and stuff like that, but it's like, but that's but like the best thing about that is like, you know how like you have the super literature nerds that were like, oh, it's actually called the monster Frankenstein. It's like actually Frankenstein is the monster.
Honestly, I'm kind of wondering how many literature nerds I just pissed off by calling it the Crow.
I hope so. I hope at least one of them has like a small aneurysm, just like, oh, ow, that hurt.
I'm expecting an angry email.
It's okay. I think it was probably a double take. Like, wait, what?
Yeah, that's why I looked it up. I was like, I must be like...
Yeah, because I saw you give me a weird look. I was like...
Oh, I didn't mean to give you a weird look.
I was like, wait a minute. I think I called the wrong thing, and I just looked it up. I'm like, God damn it.
No, I was just thinking. I was like,
no, I appreciate the weird look. It made me recheck my voice.
You can edit it. No one's going to know.
Oh, no, it's great.
It'll
It's going to be funny.
You know that story by Edgar Allan Poe called The Raven?
Oh, right?
Yeah.
Well, and with the lexicon that Poe has, it wouldn't be a shocker if he did have a story called The Crow.
It's true.
Right.
Yeah.
He was the original goth.
Yeah.
I would actually argue who's the original.
Oh, really?
Kid.
Who do you think is the original?
The original god, I would say Lord Byron.
Oh, okay.
That's
a good choice. I didn't think about that. Lord Byron is pretty.
But Poe is too whiny to be goth.
He's the first emo.
This is coming as I am a self-proclaimed emo kid. Like, that is my life. So I want to claim him as one of my own.
I mean, we all used to be down to My Chemical Romance or The Used or The Cure.
My Chem is the best band.
Or what is it? The Smiths.
Morrissey,
Siouxsie. Like,
I don't remember.
And do you have like Dan? Do you have a favorite Gothic?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I would probably say Dracula, but I would say that overall, I would not call myself an expert of that genre. Like,
I mean, obviously, I'm not. I just called it the Crow.
Well,
5 times.
I mean, still like. I mean, I like. Actually, I don't. I will admit, I really love the movie of Frankenstein. I think that the book is. It's kind of long. It's a very interesting writing style. Yeah, it's very different. There are parts
it was written such a long time ago, so.
Yeah, I mean, there are parts that I really do like about it. I think that the way that the the way that like everything in Antarctica or whatever in the Arctic, it's just like why I don't even get how that really. I mean, I get it; it's part of the story, but to me, I don't see how
it's relevant
in some ways, and that's also because I'm more familiar with the film and those sorts of things. But the scene in Bride of Frankenstein where he gets to know the blind man. Like, that scene is, I think, one of the most important scenes in that movie, and I would say in film as a medium.
I agree.
But in the novel, it's maybe it's a season at least where he's like watching the home of a family and for bringing them food, and so like he's living in the hovel or the shed or something outside of their home, and he lives there for like a whole season, and the way that he pays for that is by bringing them food, like killing like I don't know, like rodents, whatever people eat that live outside a forest and they eat from the forest. I don't know, but like
rabbits?
Those sorts of rabbits,
rabbits
which is a rodent,
squirrels.
So so
he's
he's like bringing them food, and that's how he's unspokenly paying for his living and their property. And I thought that was really meaningful. And I think the concept of Frankenstein is very meaningful, but honestly, like as a book, I would say it's not like my favorite book. But I
that's fine.
Yeah, but I do think Dracula, the novel, as opposed, which is still, you can debate the term novel anyway for Frankenstein or for Dracula. I do really like that story. I do like the Dracula book more than the films, and the lineage that comes from it. I mean, with it, and what I was saying about novel, I mean, it is a novel, but it's written in letters.
It's written as letters and
narrative, which is kind of odd. But I like that. I like the story of it. I really like the conflict of it. I like the characters as opposed to the characters in the film of. I mean, Bela Lugosi. I mean, he has a different portrayal. So, like, I love Bela Lugosi, but I see that as a separate. I see that as just such a separate entity than the novel itself. But I would say that, and I like the message behind it a lot. I think that you do have the whether they're called moral stories or whatever. Like, I like that movie a lot, especially with the cross symbolism and the that. I mean, it's in many ways like Dracula is remembered as a not terrific in a good way, but like being full of terror horror story. But in many ways, like it's a very like biblical story.
It is.
It
is, especially because like one of his nicknames is the son of the devil.
And so there's a lot of that.
Isn't it like Dracul?
Yeah.
Like traditionally, like how it's said is Dracul.
Something like
Before
that.
he
Like
becomes
dragon
Dracula.
Yeah.
He always pronounced it Dracula.
Yeah, and that was like you said, it was like it meant dragon.
Right, and dragons often equated with Satan.
And like in that origin of the world, region of the world. Back then.
So I like that one a lot. I did an adaptation of that that Rada Espinosa drew, but I wrote it, and then I also did one for Picture of Dorian Gray that Chris Allen, who's now doing like different Marvel stuff, drew.
Such an underrated story.
Dorian Gray to me is very interesting because it's a very good moral lesson in it. The film with Angela Lansbury is very different, but it's also a very good film.
Okay.
But Dorian Gray is I was really glad to get to work on those too. But Dorian Gray is a very good story. It's a very interesting story about I mean, it's pretty terrible. Like, these are vile people, and we're not. I think in many ways the villains of those stories have become the heroes.
They're kind of romanticized, like especially when you think about, especially Dracula. Like everyone's like, "Oh fuck yeah, vampires!" It's like this motherfucker, like he rips your throat out and
he
kills you.
It's not Twilight. It's more like Daybreakers, like rip your head off.
But then
drink your blood.
And I also think like what the crazy thing about it is like especially the contrast between Dracula and Frankenstein. Like, with the whole romanticizing things about it and stuff like that, is that everyone still fears the monster of Frankenstein, yet he was actually the hero in it, because like he was misunderstood. It's all how he was treated and stuff like that. But not many people like really look at the monster. They always side with the humans and stuff like that in the story. But then when you see stories of Dracula, everyone's rooting for Dracula because he's this noble, presented as this noble, beautiful person in a sense. Yeah, and it's like, fuck that guy. Like, he's such a douchebag. He beats all of his wives.
Was the original punk rocker.
Yeah.
He's the original punk. So moving forward, the proliferation of cheap periodicals as early as turn of the century led to a boom in horror writing. For example, Gaston Leroux serialized his...
Phantom of the Opera.
Thank you, because I was going to do it like the original pronunciation. I was going to butcher. There you go.
Yeah.
Before it was a novel in 1910. Influential horror writers of the early 20th century made inroads in these mediums, particularly the venerated horror author H.P. Lovecraft and his enduring Cthulhu mythos pioneered the genre of cosmic horror, and M.R. James is credited with redefining the ghost story in that era. Do you want to finish it out, or?
Yeah, and so the serial murderer became a recurring theme in horror fiction. Yellow journalism and sensationalism of various murderers such as Jack the Ripper and lesser so Karl Benzram, Fritz Harman, and Albert Fish all perpetuated this phenomenon. Yeah, that was the end of that one. I was going to keep reading. And then one of the best known contemporary horror writers is Stephen King, known for writing Carrie, The Shining, It, Misery, and many more. Mist, The Fog. Beginning in the 1970s, King's stories have managed to attract a large audience, for which he was prized by the U.S. National Book Foundation in 2003. Popular contemporary horror authors include Brian Lumley, James Herbert, Dean Koontz, Clive Barker, Ramsey Campbell, and Peter Straub. Yeah. So that, I was going to say, just because we were talking about serial murderers, it goes back to your case earlier about watching, true crimes and stuff like that. And like, yeah, Jack the Ripper is like one of the most romanticized murderers in history, mostly because he got away.
I mean, like,
or she.
That's true. He or she. No one really knows. Everyone just assumes it's a guy.
And Kyle Kinane actually made this really funny joke about Jack the Ripper, about how he took a tour. Where Jack the Ripper walked and like made his killings and whatnot. And like, he killed 8 people, and like Kyle Kinane's like, that's it?
Yeah.
In America, somebody already killed 8 people. They're on to their next day. Like, it's not word for word, but like I love that joke because it's like, when you think about it, like, killers in modern age compared to Jack the Ripper back then are far more twisted and advanced. Not saying that Jack wasn't. But, and I'm not like praising them, but it's just like, think about like how much that has grown, and even like literature containing murderers.
Yeah, and like the thing was, like, when you were talking about earlier about how you don't want to like have a poster or a shirt of this person, it's like Jack the Ripper, you can fucking get posters and shirts of them and stuff like that.
There's a tabletop game.
I played that game. That's actually a lot of fun. It's so much fun.
It's stressful.
It is, especially when because when you're cheating. I don't know whether it's more stressful to be Jack in that game or to be hunting him, because like the entire time you're just like, fuck is he going? Or like, or you're Jack the Ripper, like, shit, they went that way.
That's exactly what that game is.
But like, when you think about it, like nowadays, like, murderers are being more pronounced, serial killers are being more pronounced, and thing with whole like Ed Gein, John Wayne Gacy, they're being made movies and all this stuff about them, and people aren't taken into like, how you were saying, is like we should be looking at these films and stuff like that, or like stories about these people more as, how can we stop that?
Yeah. Well, and I want to give you a chance to go, but to add on, like, even literature has helped with solving like cases. Like most recently, the Golden State serial killer, Patton Oswalt's late wife, and she actually wrote a book talking about the Golden State serial killer, talking about what his crimes and what he's done, and really added to that investigation, which helped find the guy. In like her book was a big part in finding who the Golden State serial killer was, and like now he's like 70 and in jail now. They found him and everything, and so the fact that books, horror, in books, even though this isn't fictitious, it is real, has helped more massively than more contemporary kind of literature. I guess would be kind of a way to put it. I don't know if any of you have any thoughts on that. You're more than welcome to. Obviously,
I think it makes sense.
But
I haven't ever read anything by Stephen King or any of the others.
Really,
Stephen King.
I've seen some of their movies. I mean, some movies, but
yeah.
I don't know anything.
Stephen
about
King is like one of the reasons why I wanted to write.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The actual book of it is
So
really
good.
it's great, but it's fucking, it is out there.
Really?
It is out there. Yeah, it is. There's like
Giant
inspiration.
orgy scene.
Yeah, there's inspirations of H.P. Lovecraft in it with the whole cosmic horror.
The turtle.
The turtle, the clown, it's Pennywise itself. Like it's so inspiring. You can tell it's inspired by H.P. Like there's no way it wasn't.
Especially with the
will
Deadites.
say the best Stephen King novel, in my opinion, is definitely Joyland.
Really?
And it was only released as a like pulp crime novel, like paperback.
Okay.
Won't be on any like Kindle, no hardback, anything like that. And it's the most beautiful coming of age tale about this like heartbroken college kid, like gets his heart shattered by his ex-girlfriend, works at the circus, this carnival for a summer, drops out of college, continues working there because there's ghosts and he has to help them find peace.
Oh, that's cool.
It is one of the most beautiful books I have ever read in my life.
And a famous quote from H.P. Lovecraft is, "The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is the fear of the unknown." And so coming back to what we're talking about is, one of other Stephen King's more underappreciated works is The Dark Half, which is a story about a man who basically goes and gets a surgery, finds out he has like a twin living within his brain, and begins to take over his personality. And so the reason I bring that up is because that is kind of like an unknown kind of story within itself. Like, who really knows what resides in the darkest parts of our minds, and it's that is terrifying, because who really, besides those who I guess you would have to say are a little unhinged, who really wants to like take a really deep look into the dark part of your brain, because that is terrifying. You don't know what's there. We don't know what's there.
And it mixes.
Go ahead.
Oh,
No, she was talking.
I was just gonna say it mixes really well with like that Victorian obsession with horror, because this is back before electricity. When something goes bump in the night, you don't know what it is, and it's so hard to find out what it is. You have this little candle, it goes out.
Gotta get my musket, one shot.
And so, this fear of the unknown, just taking away sight, like makes it that much hair tingling, I guess. So.
Yeah. Alright.
What was I going to say? I don't know. I think you have to explore the dark parts of your brain. I don't think you can ignore them.
How come?
Because I don't know. How can you reckon with yourself? Like, to me, I don't know. My thought is like, if there are parts of me that I haven't explored, then they'll probably come out in another way. Maybe, if it's there, if there's something dark there, and if I have some evil thoughts and I don't keep them in order or try to, then I just anticipate they'll find their way out. And I don't know. I think it's very easy to compartmentalize and be like, nope, I'm not going to think about that. But then it's probably easy to find that when you didn't think about it or didn't figure it out. I'm not saying to go and, I feel like I should kill somebody.
There's a difference between exploring it and practicing it.
Yeah, I'd like not practicing it, because I would almost think like if someone really wants to kill someone, I feel like I really just want to like.
Yeah, if somebody wants to kill someone, they will do it. They will find a way.
Yeah, or you should probably figure out why you're wanting that. Why do you have? Is it a hate for a specific person, or the desire to be in control of someone else until you harm them? I would think that's probably good to not ignore, because you may then wind up one day with blood on your hands and then be like, why did I do that? That would be my thought, is not to ignore those things, but to try to reckon with them.
And that's a perfect transition into what I want to bring up. So I mentioned earlier, before we recorded, the Crossed series with Garth Ennis. So I've talked about the Crossed series a couple times on this podcast. So to kind of give a recap for it, so you guys know as well, The whole Cross series is by Arthur Ennis, who has done works for Punisher, Preacher.
Yeah.
We've already mentioned that. But so the whole series takes a different spin on a zombie infection. Basically, what happens is that humanity gets infected with the cross virus, where humanity will have a red rash on their face in the shape of a cross, and will act out their most heinous desires, whether it's rape, mutilation, animal abuse, anything. And the comic explores all those avenues to the most extreme possible. If you can think of the most twisted thing ever, guaranteed it's probably in the comic. It's a brutal comic, and the reason I bring it up is because I feel like it's a great topic of what is the line in horror in literature, because there's depictions of rape of dead bodies and using animal parts as weapons, and it's really brutal. And I recommend the Wish You Were Here arc of that series to a lot of people, because it is actually really well written, and it does delve into some very dark places in the human mind and humanity in general, and the nature that we all struggle with. And so it's a shocking, terrifying comic, but that's where I wonder where the line is, because a lot of its fame is because it's shocking. And so this is probably the one scene I will ever talk about on this podcast, because it is so brutal. So one scene is that, and this is a different story arc, this one's called the Family Values story arc, and there's a scene where this whole farm gets overrun by the infected people, which are the Crossed. That's why they're called the Crossed. And you see, just in the background, one of the little boys kind of get hacked up and torn to pieces. And it shows you it, and it's brutal, and it's hard to look at. And so I recommend, if you have a weak stomach, stay away from it. But so my question to you guys is, do you think that is just on the line of snuff? It's not entertaining, it's not art, it's just either a shock, or is it actually taking risks with its art? And you don't have to agree with me, you don't have to disagree with me, I just want to know what you guys think. Do you feel like stuff like The Cross goes too far with literature and comics and horror in general?
I would say both. Maybe because I love Garth Ennis, so I know if he shows something, it's not strictly just for shock value. Because a lot of stuff does things purely just for shock value, to see how far they can push it. But right. I know with him, it's definitely, there's a purpose to it. Yeah. I think if there is a purpose to it, then it is meaningful. It should be shown. But if it's just in the realm of torture porn, then it's I think you're acting out some dark fantasies.
Well, that's what it gets labeled as a lot. Is that it's torture porn, and I can see the reason for that. I mean, it's like I said, it gets really brutal. I'm not gonna lie.
I like. Still going?
Well, and I was just also going to mention what I find really fascinating about horror, and what sort of scares me the most is, again, harking back to the fear of the unknown. If you have a monster movie, I prefer not to see the whole monster. I think it's more scary if you just see the bits and flashes, because your mind fills in
your imagination.
So I would say, for me, is showing something just purely for shock value, just to get a couple of quick bucks, that's not art. That's just trying to make money. Yeah. But if it's if you're gonna scare me by showing a monster's foot, more power to you. That is truly more artistic, more terrifying, in my opinion.
Okay.
I have a lot of thoughts about that. I don't follow Avatar Publishing. I mean, I think that they should have the right to publish their material. I don't think that comic stores shouldn't be able to carry them, and I don't think it should be illegal in any way. But I don't follow any of it. I don't think I have. It's not really something I'm interested in.
Right.
Most of that they put out. Some of the other books of theirs I might dislike more for other reasons. So I don't think that it shouldn't be allowed. I don't think it should be illegal or something. I would question sometimes the place that it has for the reader and the individual reader. Is this something that people might read and then it prompts them to not commit a crime because they've read fiction about that? I don't know. But does it have that purpose? Does it serve a purpose of saying, here's a person who wants to know, what would it feel like to do this? And if you do that in a video game or in a comic, instead of imagining it, and then you imagine it until you do something, I mean, does that serve a positive society? And I think that would depend on the person, and I don't know. But I would question, like, it's art because it's not a snuff film. It's not photos of something that really happened. So it is interpreting something.
Yeah, because
it is fictitious. Yeah, it's fictitious, and
Yeah.
so I would think that's a major point for it. Whereas, like, if you have photos or video of someone cutting up a person, that's evidence of a crime. And that doesn't belong for sale to me. It belongs in a courtroom. You know, that's my thought about that, is that it's the question of, is this art or literature or film versus criminal evidence? And that to me is the difference. Is I don't think that we should be selling. I would have to debate the concepts of what was for sale, but I don't think we should be selling criminal evidence. And I think that's the major difference of, is this fiction versus is this evidence of an actual crime? And I don't know, like, I just don't read those books. I would question in some circumstances, from when I have, worked in different comic shops and been around a lot of comic conventions and stuff like that. Or I guess worked in a comic shop and been around a lot of conventions. What prompts the readership? And I think some folks, is this just like fiction for whatever, or is it torture porn? Because there are some folks who might see, quote, torture porn as something that is
like Saw, or even Hostel.
Yeah, my question would be this: in the term torture porn, a lot of people partake of pornography as a means for satisfaction.
Right.
Is the concept that torture porn provides some folks the exact same sort of satisfaction? And if it does, I would question more about that, and I would question more about why. And then I would say, like I'm not a fan of pornography, so I would question, are people watching Saw or whatever for the same sort
killings,
of torture? Are they getting that gratification that other people are getting from pornography, whether it's sexual or not? And if they are,
then it's the individual.
I would question. Yeah, it's the individual consumer. But I would question further, if this is something that provides someone with a satisfaction, I would contemplate, if I met someone who told me, I'm going to watch Saw for the satisfaction that it gives me, that to some people, which they would also see at a sexual level, I would prompt them to consider why it did and what that meant for them.
Should maybe go talk to someone later.
Should they?
You should talk about the Chilling Tales of Sabrina, what you told me.
Oh, to me it's
I love
Do you?
Yeah, I've read those. I love that series.
To me, the second issue is too much, or the second season was too much, and the reason, for the second miniseries, or whatever it's called. The reason is that it got too real.
Okay.
To me, because and I need to try to, I don't remember exactly what it was that I said, but there were circumstances of, I don't know if it was cannibalism or what it was, or even just in demonology, where there was stuff that was too real for me, that it got too much into making use of names. Like, there's a lot of stuff in Chilling Tales of Sabrina, which is very different from original Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
It's a dark take.
There's so much in that get so close to actual, like, there are groups of people today, well, I'm not talking about Wicca, but they're group, because I mean, by and large, my understanding of Wicca is that Wicca has nothing to do with human, like, cannibalism.
It's more like nature.
Yeah, you could get someone who was a cannibal and also was a Wiccan, but my guess is that most Wiccans they knew would be like, yeah, your cannibalism really is misrepresenting us.
Could you not use us anymore?
Yeah,
like how you can have a serial killer who just happens to be Catholic.
Yeah, something like that. I would debate. I don't know. I would debate that if you're a serial killer, it would be very hard to be a good Catholic. So,
it's the guilt.
Yeah,
it's the guilt.
So people, I would question if people might say, they might be they might have been baptized, but we'll debate if they are truly Catholic. That being said, so for Sabrina, it gets too real to me because, and I don't remember if it was specifically cannibalism, but also some of the demonology. I don't mean like Satanism, like atheistic LaVeyan Satanism, but like actual worshiping and celebrating of, for lack of a more precise term, evil spirits, and which does occur in Chilling Tales of Sabrina. And I do believe that there are such spirits that exist, and I do believe that there are many of the things that are real. That is part of some of my core values. And so to me, something like Sabrina, that the Chilling Tales of Sabrina, that takes these things that I do believe are real and presents them in a way that, for me, it's uncomfortable. Like in Sabrina, that one does get uncomfortable to me.
You said it was like so specific. It was almost like a guidebook to doing these things.
Okay.
I probably did say that, and there are places that I do. I'll admit I don't remember that quote, but yeah, that's what it's like. There are. Yeah, it is. Like, there's stuff that's like, this is how one could go about, and again, I'm not talking about LaVeyan Satanism, but like, what's the better term? Like, demon worship.
Okay, I was just making a joke.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't hear that.
I was like, that didn't land. I didn't specify.
Now I feel like an asshole.
No. Did you say psychology?
No, Scientology.
Oh, Scientology. But like actual demon worship, like there's something different between. I mean, we talked some about degrees, like my degrees in religion. So we talk about. There's the Satanist, who typically is atheistic, anti-LaVeyan Satanism, and then there's a Satan worshiper who's probably like a teenager that doesn't really understand. What's that?
Didn't get a hug enough.
Listen to his first Slayer album.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, if someone were to say that they wanted to find whatever it was that Satan was, but or is rather, but if they wanted to actually say this is who they believe is the Prince of Lies, that's the being that they believe in a system where that being exists as the number one prisoner of hell as a prison, not of Hades or Pluto as a realm, and they know that this person loses. Like, they believe in that Satan who loses, and they say, I want to participate in that path to loss. That's why, to me, like, there aren't many people who say, this is my... I mean, there are not many demon worshippers who have articulated belief systems, because it doesn't make sense if they're going to believe in a Hebrew Satan. Like I can't fathom any reason that a person would have a detailed belief system that was actualized that incorporated the devotion to the Hebrew and Judeo-Christian Satan, because that being is there's not a redeeming value of that being. Now, can you do like a Dorian Gray thing where that being says, well, I'm going to give you power while on earth, but like, I don't know any Satanists that actually said, like, yeah, I got this really good skill at playing the fiddle. You know, like, and those are stories.
So stale.
Yeah,
went down to Georgia.
So things like that. But with Chilling Tales of Sabrina, you do have beings who they're not thinking about the in anything that actually has to do with like worshiping of evil, otherness beings. To me, there was too much in it that I'm familiar enough with that it was uncomfortable for me, because there are people who want to worship those actual probably evil otherness beings that I believe exist without seeing maybe they're not believing in the full picture of it, and they're just like, I don't know, again, that's completely different from Wicca, and it's completely different from
right.
Mm-hmm.
So then
atheistic Satanism.
So we're talking a little bit. So we're actually running a little short on time, but we can go over a little bit.
Yeah.
So I want to talk. We want to talk more about kind of like horror in comics. So we just brought up like Cross and Sabrina, like how it rubbed you the wrong way and how Cross.
Yeah, I'm not.
is
like,
guaranteed
those
to
my
like
things, yeah.
Cross can rub people the wrong way. So they're talking about that. There was backlash in the late 1940s with comic books and particularly crime comics, which had become the target of mounting public criticism for their content and their potentially harmful effects on children, with accusations from several fronts that charged comic books with contributing to the rising rates of juvenile delinquency. And then we kind of saw a resurgence with a number of supernatural mystery / suspense titles that were introduced in the latter half of the 1960s, including Charlton Comics' Ghostly Tales, The Many Ghosts of Dr. Graves, and Ghost Manor, and Marvel Comics' Chamber of Darkness / Monsters on the Prowl, and even Tower of Shadows, Creatures on Loose, and on DC Comics and new House of Mystery editor Joe Orlando returned the title to its horror roots with issue number 175 in July / August of 1968. A similar transformation was made to House of Secrets, and the company also debuted the new titles The Unexpected and The Witching Hour. So our question here is that, where do you think horror is more terrifying when it comes to literature? Do you think it is more terrifying in comics because we have pictures to really emphasize certain scenes, or do you think it's more terrifying in just fictitious books because it leaves your imagination to create the picture in your mind?
Ooh, I hate this question because it's a really good question.
So yeah, just honest thoughts again. Let's just have this discussion. Let's unwrap this.
Okay, I have a lot of nightmares, and I don't find anything like that terrifying. I find my past experiences terrifying, and I dream them, and I re-experience them, and those are the things that I find terrifying. I don't find monsters or any sort of fiction terrifying.
Okay, really? So even if it's just a really brutal picture, it can be unsettling, but it doesn't scare you.
Chilling Tales of Sabrina doesn't scare me. It doesn't terrify me. It's not something that I want. Like, I don't like pentagrams. Like, I hate pentagrams and I hate Ouija boards. I'm not afraid of them. I don't think that it's scary.
Right.
If someone has a Ouija board hoodie, I don't think that's scary. There was an issue of Three Stooges where they were in, like, it was like a parody story. Like, I always like the monster Three Stooges stories, but they were in like a haunted house, and there was a Ouija board, and the inker didn't ink it, and the penciler didn't draw the details on it. The inker didn't ink it. I was like, I don't want to draw a Ouija board. That creeps me out. Like, I don't want to draw that. But that's because I believe that there is something to Ouija boards, and I'm afraid one day a kid's going to get a Monopoly board and doesn't realize at Parker Brothers they printed a Ouija board and put the Monopoly sticker on top.
Quick aside, don't play with Ouija boards.
I was just going to free parking, that's all.
Don't mess around with that crap. It's not a game.
Yeah.
It's serious. Don't play with it.
I think, I agree. I think that it's. I mean, you really couldn't have a Monopoly board that had a Ouija board sticker on it, but it's that it's used to communicate with other beings,
with forces that we're really not meant to communicate with.
You give them permission to touch you, to move your hands, and to communicate through you.
Yeah.
No. Small shout out to Code 3 for being brave enough to go out there and do that for us. They're a Denver paranormal group that are friends of ours that come on here. So.
Well, that's cool that they go on it, but I mean, I truly do think that there is communication there, and I don't know everything about it, but so for me, I just don't enjoy that stuff. Yeah. I'm not afraid of, like, if there's a Ouija board, like if someone's wearing a Ouija board hoodie, I don't like it. One time I was at an event and I was exhibiting next to a guy who had like Charles Manson and Adolf Hitler t-shirts, and that creeped me out.
It's a weird thing to just want to wear.
It was disturbing. I was like, what? Now, and they were like mashups. It was like Hitler interposed, or whatever you call it, over Snow White. Because that was a movie he liked, like Disney's Snow White.
Okay.
And then there was one that was Charles Manson with like an octopus body coming out of his neck. But the thing was, he had these shirts folded, and so you only saw Charles Manson. And that freaked me out a lot, because I was like, who is this person who's next to me, and why would he be selling t-shirts that he designed with Charles Manson on them? And furthermore, who are the people that are going to him to buy these t-shirts with Charles Manson on them? Now, at first I didn't see the octopus on it, but again, nor did the customers. Right. So to me, that scares me. I don't enjoy pentagrams because of what they represent, and I don't mean like the
wicked ones, or
no, not a pentacle, but
okay.
If a pentagram, I mean more of I'm not scared of LaVeyan Satanists, right. Probably because I understand the belief system, but I know that symbol is meant to represent, like the way that they use it, is meant to represent a goat's head. And they use it like as the goat being, even going back to the the scapegoat practice. They've used the goat as the sheep are good and goats are bad. So it's an embracing of that, but it's also something used in a black mass, and I just don't enjoy that image because of what it often represents. That being said, a pentagram is different from, or even a Ouija board. A Ouija board, I don't know. I think they're creepy. I think that, but that's because because I believe in a realness associated with it,
right? As
opposed to a comic from Avatar.
Yeah.
Not that there isn't stuff. I would have to look at every Avatar title, but I don't see anything scary about anything like that. To me, my nightmares are about things I don't want to experience again, right. And then I close my eyes, and then before I wake up, I get to experience that again. Those are things that I've been more troubled by.
Patricia, what do you think?
I would actually say thinking about it, more scared of horror comics for the sole purpose that if you write a horror novel, that is your vision, that's shared by one person, and then your readers experience it. With comics, though, it is so much of a group effort. You do have a lot of people working on this comic, so now it becomes a shared vision.
Yeah.
It's the vision of several different people that come together to make this one thing, and then the reader experiences it. Or if it's a serial comic, the reader can write into the editor, and then the reader becomes part of the experience too. So it spreads like a wildfire almost. Mm-hmm. And I guess more of this group shared horrific thing that happens is a little bit more terrifying to me than one person's vision of a horrific thing that happens.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, like, reading a horror book is more terrifying than reading a comic. Yeah. Mostly because, like, when I'm reading a horror book, like when I was reading Frankenstein, or like, even though it gives like descriptions of like what the creature might look like and stuff like that, it kind of makes me look more inward. Because it is my vision. Yeah. So it's like I'm reading like that, or Cujo, or
Cujo is so good.
Yeah, I know. Like, it's any actual books like that are horror books, because like I'm picturing that and it makes me look inward. I'm like, man, I'm fucked up. like what I'm imagining and stuff like that. But when I'm reading a comic, like I don't know. When I was reading, like 30 Days a Night is like at least the first story is actual horror. The second one's kind of get too action-y in my opinion and stuff like that, but like the one that the movie's based off of and stuff, like it's supposed to be like dreaded and stuff like that, but I don't know, it almost seemed a little more campy in a sense, because I'm seeing the action happen, and while it makes me like, there's some images in there that make me a little uncomfortable or whatever, like I'm not actually afraid of seeing these things. Like same with like the Preacher series, like it's not this Preacher series isn't really horror, but like has horror elements.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And like there are like a bunch of things, like some of the scenes where like a character is about to be raped. Like that's more of my like more uncomfortable scenes. But then you see this like short little bald guy that's having sex with a giant meat woman that he makes out of it, like in his meeting plant. Like I laughed my ass off when I saw that. I was like, Jesus Christ! Like like I find more humor, or like I can get more humor out of comics or horror comics and stuff like that. While I'm reading a book, I'm like delving more inside my own mind and creating these images, and I'm just like, all right, well.
That's the great thing about horror is because it's a very much kind of a slash genre. You can have horror, horror comedy, horror action, horror romance, and it melds so nicely with these other genres that you can see this is a really horrific thing and laugh your ass off, or you can watch something like Warm Bodies, which in my opinion is the best chick flick in the entire world. Also, the book by Isaac Marion is beautiful as well. But yeah, you have horror romance where you don't think, oh yeah, zombies are kind of sexy.
All right, Tina.
Smells bad, but he's such a good heart.
He's such a good heart. I'm gonna make him beat again. I can fix him.
For me, and I'll close because we're at like an hour and 10 now. So I'll end it with my stance on it, if that's okay with the table.
No, that's all I used.
So with my statement, this perfectly divides the table where Corey and Dan, you guys are in your own little ship.
Did you just call me Corey?
Cody.
Oh no,
Cody. Sorry.
No,
it's been a long day.
Podcast over. Fuck this. How long have we been friends?
I think he said Cody. I think
this is Cody.
It was like a D that almost sounded like a roll of R. It's like if you say
you can't pull your Hispanicness into this shit.
It's like if you say Garza, but you're like Garza. It's like, is it a D? Is it a R?
Corte.
Yeah, there you go. That's what he said. Yeah.
You want some cerveza?
Yeah.
Los chicharrones?
I never met.
I accept that. So you call me Matty Ice.
No. Whatever. Go on.
So perfectly divided. Perfectly divides the table. So I feel like horror comics are more terrifying only because I understand where you're coming from, Cody. With books, with books where it makes you look inwards. With fictitious books, the horror stories make you look inwards, make you look more of an immoral kind of like stance from yourself. But I think horror comics are more terrifying because it's like, okay, I don't want to look inward. I don't want to like take my own perspective. I want to see what this group of people have decided to make to try to terrify me. And I want to test these people. I want to see how bad this gets. And that's why I read the Cross series, because I want to be like, okay, let's see how bad this actually gets. And it utterly made me uncomfortable. There's things that made me terrifying, and it made me feel vulnerable. And then I realized it did what horror movies and horror terrifying things are supposed to do, which is supposed to make you feel vulnerable, supposed to take you on a trip, supposed to like make you feel like you're going on a mental roller coaster ride. Of whether you can say enjoyment or non-enjoyment is up to the individual, but that's why I think it's more terrifying. And when you have pictures to accompany the text to really bring it across and like really emphasize those scenes, it is more terrifying. Because if I read Crossed in just a fictitious book, yeah, I could imagine it, and it could be pretty scary, and then I could imagine my own thing. But seeing how they draw it out, seeing how gory and detailed it gets, makes it very uncomfortable, makes you feel vulnerable, made me like kind of like scared of my fellow man, because excuse me, because it really explored those dark depths of human nature. And in my opinion, that's why I think it's a solid horror pick, because it took risks. It did what it needed to express its art, to express its message, and express its terror. And I think that's why I recommend it and why I like it, because it's my whole opinion is if you want to reach that peak of terror and horror in comic books, I suggest the Crossed series to everyone who is ready for that next step. If you're not, take your time or avoid it completely. So that's where we stand. Like that, we're now at an hour and 12 minutes.
Yeah.
This, just like last episode, this has been fun. We got a lot of time. I'm sorry to cut it so short and whatnot.
I shorted an hour and a half. hour and 12.
So I don't mean to kind of just hurry and be like, okay, let's go. But we are past our time limit.
Good stuff.
So
it's good.
again, thank you, Patricia and Dan, for coming
for
coming on and talking with us about this. This has been an absolute blast. Again, everyone, all of our listeners, you amazing listeners, go check out My Gal the Zombie. Get ready to check out the new Nightmare Before Christmas comic that both Dan and Patricia are working on, and just keep your eyes out for these two amazing people who are making this great work.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, it's fun.
And thank you again to all your listeners for tuning in. As always, if you want to keep up with what we're doing, follow us on Facebook, Punk Rock Horror Podcast, and our Twitter @officialphp.
On Instagram, Punk Rock Horror Podcast, #PHP Podcast.
And if you have any strange stories or want to send us your band info for our band interview episodes, please send them to our email, punkrockhorrorpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like what we're doing and you want to support us and help us grow a little more, please consider going over to our Patreon and consider becoming a supporter. With that being said, thank you again for everyone for tuning in. And bye.
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 Yeah, thanks everybody.